All right, our next presenter is Dr. Natasha Matthews. Dr. Matthews is a cognitive neuroscientist and senior lecturer at UQ's School of Psychology and a chief investigator here in the UQ Learning Lab. Her research combines her extensive expertise in psychology, neuroscience, and the science of learning to understand the mechanisms that underlie cognition, attention, and learning in both adult and child populations. Her foundational work in the UQ Learning Lab is providing critical insights into how metacognition develops throughout the lifespan. Please join me in welcoming Natasha Matthews.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Great, excellent. So yes, I'm a psychologist, and so that's the perspective I bring to the study of learning. And today I wanted to give you a very brief overview, both of how I think about self-regulation in learning and a couple of just very brief tasters about projects we're currently running as part of the Learning Lab that are kind of underway at the moment. So before I start getting into the projects, I wanted to think a little bit about what is self-regulation for learning and what is the challenge that learners face? So we know that learning exists in classrooms, but it also exists in lots of other spaces as well. So we start off with our learner. Maybe the student is in their first years of high school. And so their first challenge is adapting to that new environment, but also, like Imogen has kind of indicated, they're also adapting to rapid changes in the development of their own underlying ability to think about things and their emotions as well. So that's the first challenge for this student, to regulate those developing skills. But the student also exists in this kind of peer and educational context as well. So they have to also regulate the way they interact with their classroom environment. Maybe they have to receive feedback well, maybe they have to make a plan for their work, and they have to interact with their peers, who we know are having a huge impact on their kind of social and emotional development during this time. But this student also exists in a home environment as well. So they have to regulate their ability to study at home. Maybe they don't have a quiet place to study. Are they getting enough sleep? Are their parents good role models for how to plan and manage your schoolwork? Are they encouraging them? So there's this kind of home environment as well. And broadly, this learner also exists in a kind of broader educational and social context. So they have to regulate how they interact with all the technologies they're using and with the social media platforms that are very cleverly monetized to steal and capture their attention every day. So they have to manage all of those demands as well. So overall, managing your own learning as a learner, as a student, or even as an adult is challenging because it involves regulating all of these different contexts. And this becomes quite a huge challenge for learners. And this is the issue I'm interested in understanding in my research. How do learners, both adults and children, manage the competing demands on their time and attention? And for me, I would argue that one of the most important ways that learners do this is by using their metacognitive skills or metacognition. So metacognition is a term that gets used a lot. It can mean a lot of different things. So I'll take a few seconds in a moment to describe what I think metacognition is. But metacognition helps us understand our own strengths and weaknesses as learners. And we can use metacognition to do many things. If we're using it to make our memory better, that would be called meta memory, for example. But when we're using it to monitor and manage our own learning, it becomes an important component of self-regulated learning. And the kind of final ingredient in this little model would be motivation. So in order to be self-regulated as a learner, in order to want to use these skills, you also have to be motivated to learn as well. So this is how I feel all of those little pieces fit together. So overall, the ultimate goal as a self-regulated learner, if you're thinking about somebody who is in that those multiple contexts I outlined, what we would hope is that we can give students a set of skills, or learners a set of skills that mean that they can take their learning beyond formal learning settings. So they can be flexible in when they use these skills, but also that those skills are adaptable so that those students and those learners can change with the competing demands of the context that they find themselves in. And so an ultimate self-directed learner would be somebody who is aware of their strengths, who has a lot of strategies that they can use, who's aware of when strategies are working for them, and who remains motivated to learn. So in terms of achieving this kind of gold standard of self-regulation, metacognition is one of the important skills. So because I'm a psychologist, I like to take a concept and split it into 1,000 parts. And so this is what I'm doing here with metacognition. So metacognition is not just a thing, it has different subcomponents from the perspective of psychology, at least. So first we have that underlying cognitive ability that Imogen was talking about. And we know that certainly in adolescence, this ability is both developing a lot and also very variable among people. So not everybody has the same memory ability, not everybody has the same attention ability. And so the first step in metacognition is having some kind of metacognitive knowledge. So some awareness of what is your memory like? What is your attention like? Are you good at remembering facts, or are you better at making kind of conceptual links between things? And this also includes knowledge about what are the demands of tasks you might do. So if you're studying for a biology test that requires you to remember a lot of facts, then that's your knowledge, that's your metacognitive knowledge about the demands of a test. And that might interact with your knowledge about how good you are at remembering facts, for example. But then to do that task, to remember those facts, to do that test, you need a set of skills, you need a strategy, you need some kind of way to approach the task. And this is metacognitive skill. So this might be, you might know that one of the things you can do to make yourself remember more facts is test yourself. So you might make a series of little cue cards, you might test yourself every few days. And you know that's a skill or a strategy you can use to improve your memory. And then you have metacognitive control and monitoring, which is kind of the evaluation part of metacognition. Is that technique you're using, is it working? Are you actually remembering more facts every day? Is it working out for you? And at the end, when you've done the test and you have your results, are you happy with how that worked out? Do you think that skill worked for you? Would you use it again next time? And so in this way, metacognition becomes a process rather than a single one-off event. And if we split that metacognitive monitoring into planning, monitoring, and evaluation, we get this kind of process by which we hope learners think about the things they do. They have a knowledge about themselves, they use that knowledge to make a plan, they use a strategy, they monitor if that strategy works, and then they evaluate it for next time. And they use this process to both learn more about themselves, which things they're good at, but also hopefully they use it to learn what things work for them. And so one technique for studying might work really well for somebody with excellent memory, but that might not work so well with somebody who has poor memory. And so through these iterations, people become more in tune with the things that work for them. So the main takeaway I wanted to make about metacognition is that it's made of components. And if we wanted to improve metacognition or understand metacognition, we might study different components. We might give students or learners more skills. We might help them develop better self-awareness, or we might help them better develop better monitoring and evaluation of their learning. So this is the approach I like to take when I'm looking at trying to understand these skills, with the additional caveat that metacognitive ability develops. It changes with age. Just like the underlying cognitive abilities are changing, the metacognition also changes. So what's achievable at each age in terms of what we can expect metacognitively from learners is also changing. So in my 2 minutes, I will try to talk about 2 studies that look at metacognition in 2 age groups. So we've looked at metacognition across the age range in our work, but today I'll talk about teens and adults. So the big project I've been running most recently as part of my work in the Learning Lab is looking at the development of students' ability to monitor to regulate their cognitions and emotions, and how that's linked to academic wellbeing. So this research is funded by the Queensland Department of Education. And like Steph was saying, this research really is inspired by problems or issues that teachers came to us with that they've observed in their classes. So we know that the transition to high school is a very tricky time for students. We know that that places a lot of additional demands on their learning. And as a result, there is often this dip or reduction in students' academic wellbeing and in their engagement in learning in this transition period. But we also know that this is really an important time for developing metacognition, particularly the strategies, the toolkits for approaching tasks, and also that self-awareness. So we wanted to know, does the ability to regulate our cognitions and emotions during this really critical time, do those two things develop together? And importantly, do they predict academic well-being? Are those students who are better self-regulated weathering this dip better? Are they maintaining better engagement with their learning over time? And that's our key question. So to answer this question, a lot of the partner schools have seen me this year because I've come to talk to you about this research, and I've received a lot of excellent assistance in terms of recruiting participants for this research. This research is ongoing, so we're currently having participants come into the lab where they complete a series of tests of these measures. So I don't have a final answer to show you. However, as part of this work I've been doing with the partner schools, we've been running workshops with students trying to understand, when we ask these students in the early stages of high school, what do you know about how you can manage your learning? Tell us what you use. And students have been telling us their strategies. And my PhD student, Callie, will have a poster on this in the poster session after lunch, where she will be presenting some of our preliminary findings about what it is these students know about how to manage their learning. And I am going to steal 1 extra minute to talk about one more thing. Being adaptable and flexible in your learning isn't just important in a classroom context, but it's also important in other key transition points in education. And for me, as a university lecturer, I'm trying to prepare university students for the workforce. And that's a challenge currently because the nature of work is changing rapidly. The jobs that my graduates will have next year might not even exist yet. And so the big challenge is producing students who are flexible, adaptable, and can manage their own learning outside the classroom and in evolving contexts. And as part of this, I'm doing some research on work integrated learning. How do students learn on the job? How can they take real life experiences and extract learning from those experiences and use these self-regulation skills to help manage and modify their learning in these diverse contexts? So in this case, what I'm really looking at in these adult populations is that monitoring process. This is the last process to develop way into the 30s. This kind of frontal cortex process is still developing. So for these graduating students, they might have a lot of skills, but they don't have a good sensitivity to where they work, when they work, and for whom they work. And so a part of this research, we're looking at using things like structured reflections as a way of understanding how we can help students both improve self-reflection and to try to understand which are the students that can do this well already. What are the factors that make somebody a dynamic, flexible worker in the workplace, and can we predict those things? So I've stolen enough time, but thank you for your attention. Happy to talk later about any schools who want to be involved in our projects and answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tash. I think we can probably field one quick question if anyone has any. Tash is obviously happy to answer questions during the breaks as well. Ryan.
G'day, Tash. My curiosity is to do with individual differences or factors that predict metacognitive skill. Are there things that are strongly correlated to this, or is it not really so clear as that? For example, does IQ predict something like this?
Well, we do know that the students who have, so in terms of metacognition predicting outcomes, which is the way it usually goes in the research, we know that students who have the biggest toolkit of skills are the best learners, have the higher IQ, and do better in diverse environments. So whether that goes the other way, not quite so sure yet, but certainly having more skills is better. Yeah.
And we just have one. Do you have a very quick question, sir? Yeah. Great.
Well, maybe not. I was just wondering. I was just wondering, with the different phases of metacognition, have you got any research that talks about upskilling the students or the ages and how that kind of corresponds to their skill like in the next phase of development?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions we're trying to answer in the work we're doing with the high school students. So often people just say, does metacognition predict this thing? But we want to know which part of metacognition is the best thing to target. So those students that are trying to maintain their engagement in school, is it better for them to have more skills, more self-awareness, or better monitoring? And that's an outstanding question that we don't know yet. So usually research just tries to give students extra skills, which is the easy thing to do. That's like teaching kids study skills. But helping them build their self-awareness, that's really tricky. But that might be the secret puzzle piece, hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tash.